Hello, Brain Tap Nation. This is Dr. Patrick Porter here again, bringing you cutting edge information. And over the years, we've been doing a lot of work with Parker and meeting great doctors there. And then I ran into the next guest, who's an author, public speaker. He's a veteran. He's an entrepreneur. He's an award-winning coach. And what really intrigued me is he's a sports doctor, and we're getting more and more into working with sports with Brain Tap. And he has some pretty powerful things to say. He's traversed the journey of being homeless, if you can imagine that. Then he was inspired to join the military. He became a leader that he is today. He has over 15 years combined teaching, coaching experience in high school and in the state of Texas, which, as you know, that's like the professional league. So if you go there, sports are a religion there. And he's held a principal administration certificate. He's taught universities for the past 10 years. And as he served in the Army for 8 years prior to earning his bachelor's degree, he's been there, done that, and he went to Mississippi State University. And since earning that Master's of Education in Leadership, he's done a lot as a doctor of chiropractic. He's the Master of Strength and Performance. And I would say that he's a master of recovery, because that's what you need in sports. You need to have a way to recover. So he's been on TV, radio, podcasts. He's been all over the world. He's been keynoting. And who I'm talking about is Dr. Davis McAlister. Dr. McAlister, welcome to the podcast.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was so impressed when we get to speak with you. I think we started talking at times during the Parker event and come by the booth, and we'd see you walking around. And then we got talking about, hey, can you share your journey with our doctors? Because, everyone needs to have a little motivation and find out what had happened. So tell us a little bit about your background and your journey. I mean, how did you go from being homeless to joining the military to then going to school in chiropractic? Most people think after 8 years in the military, hey, it's time to get out there and get a job and do what you want to do, but you went to school. So tell us about that journey.
So when I was in high school, I'm an 80s kid, so it kind of dates me a little bit. And my home life, I have no doubt that my parents loved me, but it was very tenuous type relationship, very tense all the time, and eventually it finally just came to a head. And my dad just said, get out. So that was my option. I was given 5 minutes to grab whatever I could and get out the door, and found myself on the streets. I was sleeping under the bleachers outside of the school, scrounging up food wherever I could, and did that for about 3.5 months. And then finally, managed to get in contact with a recruiter, and they said, we'll feed you, we'll clothe you, we'll pay you, give you a place to stay, just do what we need you to do. And so I said, sign me up. And so that's what I did. Ended up doing that for 8 years. And I enjoyed my time in. There was a lot that I had to learn. There was a lot that I had to unlearn through that process. And, we'll get into a little bit, but, it's about that mental change that has to take place, from, overcoming certain things and certain mentalities and certain thought processes, and you don't know what you don't know. And the thing is if you don't intentionally replace it with something else, you're just going to revert back to what you do know, right, wrong, or otherwise. And you're just going to continue to repeat the same cycle over and over again. So
yeah, I love that. And you talk about phases of success, because a lot of people just want to say, I remember when I graduated, I get this PhD and I go back to my office and nothing really changed. There was no light at my door waiting for people to see me. Basically, that's when you start the work. So tell me about these phases of success, because we talked a little bit about it. And I thought, wow, that's pretty powerful. People need to understand the process of success. So why don't you go ahead and share that with us?
Yeah. So kind of looking back over my journey of everything, I went through 4 phases. And so my first phase was success for survival. Basically, the ultimate goal is to get off the street and, establish myself and, try to get my life on track and, overcome all the things that I had to overcome and get on track and get on purpose with my life. And so that was my, success for, survival. And then you progress to, the next one is succeeding for rebellion. And for me, it was, one of those that if you tell me I'm not going to succeed, guess what? I'm fixing to show you wrong. And, there's that little bit of determination and people that tell you that you can't do it, and you're like, watch me. And there was plenty of times that I, was able to do that. I don't think that that's the optimal way to approach things. I don't think that at the time, in my level of maturity that I had at the time, that was my motivation. So, and then the next phase is just succeeding just for the sake of succeeding. You finally graduate and you mature out of that process and of rebellion and survival, and then you finally get to this phase of, you know what, I want to succeed just because I want to succeed. And that's where I was at by the time I got out of the service and started going to school. And I wanted to succeed just because I wanted to succeed, and because that's what was important to me at the time. And that eventually it should transition to success for purpose, and figuring out what is your purpose, why are you here, what is your drive, what is your passion, what are the things that you're most knowledgeable about, and then how do you take those things and apply them to a purpose and live for that purpose from that point on. And so that's my final phase that I've gotten to, and I'm running full tilt with it and trying to serve my purpose. And there's things that you learn about yourself through all that. There's talents that you didn't even realize you may have had along that journey, and that you can add into that toolbox and toolkit of things that you can use to be able to serve your purpose.
Yeah. What was it like to have that flip that switch from survivor kind of success to now life on purpose? I mean, a lot of people are out there still trying to survive after what's happened after the last 3 years. They're still trying to find themselves, what they're going to do and how they're going to proceed.
Yeah.
What was your enlightening moment that, like Saul had his way to Damascus, got hit by lightning? What happened with you?
Yeah. So the I'll be honest with you, my journey of purpose of being able to serve people and help people started long before that. It was actually while I was in practice. Found myself in a position where my wife had gotten really, really sick, and I needed to transition from the level of practice. At one point in time, I had two locations going, and trying to balance that. And we had kids. At the time we had 5 kids and at home, and they ranged from high school all the way down to diapers. And so there's times that you may dip back down into that success for survival at times, because things happen. And that's kind of where we ended up. I had started progressing. We were succeeding just for the sake of success. And then we found ourselves in a position. My wife had gotten really, really sick. I needed to be able to spend more time at home. I had to free myself up. And so we ended up making some changes. And in that process, there were several things that I learned. One was I was missing out on some of the most important things. Now, one was my kids growing up. I was repeating a generational curse that I grew up with and I saw what it led to. And I had to make a determination that if I'm going to break that curse, if I'm going to break that cycle, I'm going to have to do something different. And so I had to make some changes, and that's how I ended up. I've never been out of practice. I've always been in practice. I just transitioned to how much I was in practice. And so I made a transition, decided that I wanted to be able to spend more time with my kids, because when I ended up with them, being hard charging in practice and all those things, and then my wife got sick, and I needed to be able to spend more time at home to take care of her and what was going on with the kids. I had to start slapping reality. I didn't know who my kids were. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know what they liked. I didn't know what they didn't like. I didn't know anything about them. And I was like, I've got to make some changes. And then in that process, I ended up in education and coaching, and I was still practicing. And, I found that I had an ability to be able to reach kids and be able to take the things that I had learned and the struggles that I had overcome and say, hey, maybe I can teach these kids how to get ahead in life. And that's kind of what set me on my trajectory of purpose. My purpose solely is to try to help people do and try to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that I fell into, because I've had to learn everything the hard way. It's just been the way things have gone for me. I've had to bust my butt for everything that I've got. And if I can help somebody be able to skip a step or two to be able to get ahead, and be able to enjoy life a little bit more, then that's what I'm here for.
That's great. And that takes me to the next question I was thinking of is, a lot of people will share their successes, but they never really share, what they failed at, because, most successful people failed fast at certain things. They still failed. It's just they recognize that they weren't working. So you've learned a lot of things. You had to unlearn a lot of things in your journey. Give us some examples of what those are.
So this kind of goes back to that mentality of things. So this has been a struggle for a long time. One was my attitude about money. And, a lot of times people associate money, and if you're living, God's purpose and doing all those things don't mix, and you're kind of imprinted. I've been watching and reading some of the stuff by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he gets into a lot of neurology and brain patterns and those types of things. And one of the things that he talked about, he said, you're imprinted by the age of 12, your basic concept, your basic understanding and concepts of things, and including money and, handling stress and doing all those things. And, my dad was an accountant. He constantly stressed over money, and it was a constant, source of frustration. And I found myself doing the same thing. And there's times that I still, will start, if I'm not conscious of it, I'll slip back into that. And I've had to unlearn that process. One of the other things that I had unlearned was when I was in the service. My first squad leader was very different from everybody else. And because, everybody associates being in the military, everybody just stands around and yells at each other. And it really isn't that way. But even still, my first squad leader, he didn't hardly ever raise his voice to us. As long as we were doing what we were supposed to do, everything was fine. And finally, one day I asked him, because all the other squad leaders were constantly yelling at their guys and giving them what we call smoke sessions out in the courtyard, and things like that when they didn't listen. And he said, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I was told when I was a young soldier. He said, if all I ever do is yell at you, when I have something really important to say, you're not going to hear me, because it sounds like everything else that I say. And, I grew up in a household that, there was a lot of yelling and things like that. And that was kind of my default. And when he told me that made a lot of sense. And so I approached my leadership that way. I led my soldiers that way. I've coached that way. I've raised my kids that way. And that has been a very, very profound thing. To where if people know that you have a certain, kind of even keel, if you come out of that, there's a specific reason for it, and it's going to get people's attention. And, that was very, very impactful for me.
I agree with that. And when my mother passed away, she gave us each a baby book. We didn't know she was collecting all the little things about us. And apparently when I was 5 years old, I gave my dad a note that said, you can't control me with your voice. and out of 9 kids, he would never raise his voice to me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't tolerate it. I don't know where that came from. It was, and I've always been that way. I say that, just because you're raising your voice doesn't mean somebody's going to hear you better, and I think you're right. I mean, it is normal to get upset and angry or want, raise your voice, but to do it all the time, then there's no what we would call analog marking in psychology. You don't know that it's important or not. And our brains have certain cues that they do. So you talk a lot about mental aspects of success. I mean, when you look at a project, or like when you get up and give a keynote speech and you do these things to help motivate, or you get up and coach somebody, maybe you're down at halftime or whatever, and you're working with your team. How do you relate that mental aspect? Because it's easy to be positive when everything's going right. It's the real leader is the one that stays positive even when things, the wheels come off the train, and you've got to get it back on track.
Yeah. The key to that is that mental preparation has to start way ahead of time. That goes back to your, when I was coaching, that's, a daily thing. You're constantly talking about that mental aspect, mental preparation. When we would have our team meetings, all right, from a mental standpoint, what do we need to do here? How do we approach this? And learning how to implement processes and those things. And so when we have those situations where we're down at halftime, or it's coming up on a challenging situation, the biggest thing is that you don't want to overinflate, but you don't want to underinflate either. And so you've got to know your people, and you speak into your people for what motivates them, and you're going to positive. You got to tell them you can do this, and you give them examples. Give them a couple brief examples of when they have done it, and get that little fire in them. But the thing is getting to laser in and focus on the task at hand. Take one play at a time. This is the same thing as success. Same thing in business. You take one thing at a time. And keep a picture of the whole picture. Don't get so locked down on all the little individual pieces, because when you start looking at all the individual pieces and all the to-do tasks and all those things, and I'm just as guilty of it. Sometimes my wife has to reel me in. I look at my to-do list, and it's like, where do I start today? And it's the same application. You just focus in on all the task that you're dealing with, present time consciousness, deal with what's in front of you at the moment, and then move on to the next thing, and then try to maintain your image of how does this piece fit into the bigger picture. So
let's imagine for a moment that I'm an athlete. I'm coming to you. Maybe I had an injury. That's what brought me to you. And now my thinking's shifted off course. What kind of tools, techniques, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, what do you bring to the table that allows them to overcome that adversity and start moving on? And maybe talk from a doctor's perspective too. What are some of the tools in your toolbox that you apply to rapidly get them, first of all, of course, back on the field, but to get them back on the field with the right mindset so they can start to achieve?
Yeah, the biggest thing with an athlete that you're having to rehab and work with is the fear. They're afraid, especially if they've never been hurt. Some of these high school athletes, they encounter their first injury, and it seems to take them twice as long to come back than somebody that's already had an injury or had an injury earlier on, and they've already had that experience. And yeah, you're like you said, there is a mental process that has to take place. They have to build that confidence up in it. And so when you're going through and doing your rehab, if you're doing good rehab, you should be establishing where their baseline is, progress, regress at times when it's necessary, but constantly do that reinforcement of, okay, see, you can do this, and reinforce that every time they come in, and make sure that they are recognizing and that they see the progress that they're making, and then get them to, once they get to the point where they realize, what, this isn't going to hurt anymore, and I can actually go full tilt. They'll get out there and they'll execute.
That's awesome. Now, I know that when I was working with the gymnasts, the Olympic, they were trying to qualify, and they were all pretty much the same. I mean, but the problem was those that could recover after injury, those are the ones that made it onto the Olympics, because everybody got injured. I mean, people don't think about that as being a dangerous sport, but those guys are throwing the girls and the guys, they're throwing their bodies around, and they're doing things that seem unnatural. So what do you do and I love what Tom Brady's group, we're starting to work with them now, and they talk about prehab. People don't often think about that. Tell us a little bit about your strategies around that.
So with prehab, I actually have a program that I wrote, and I've gotten to deliver it several times now. Matter of fact, I got to go up to the NFL Combine, and they had the Professional Football Chiropractors Society that was having their annual conference there at the Combine, and I got to go up and present my information on non-contact ACL prehab and how to identify risks and all those. Prehab is absolutely, the goal is to be able to identify problems before they become problems. And so from my standpoint, I do a lot of functional movement. I'm going to look and see how somebody moves. I'm going to put them through some basic movements. I'm going to put them through some athletic movements, and we're going to see how they operate. And then we're going to take plans, and we're going to take the time to address those issues before they become a major problem, because it's a risk assessment. You're doing a risk assessment, and then now you're taking the steps to minimize that risk.
Right. That's great. And a lot of this is in your book, right? I mean, you wrote a book called Success by Design, Principles for Creating Your Best Life. And you're actually, anybody listening to this, if you go to the site, there's a place on there, right? They can register and get the first chapter to see if this is something they want to apply. Tell us a little bit about that journey. of
Yeah,
writing a book and sharing it with people?
yeah. So I wrote that book. That's actually my, I guess, third book, if you consider, my first book I put out last year. It was a book on a collection of stories and how I approached, a framework, putting together a framework, taking a business model and applying it to raising your family. And then we wrote a study guide to go with that. And then in May of this year, published my next book, Success by Design. And it's the process that I went through to figure out how to, succeed. And it's a framework. Again, it's not, it's taking you through how do you determine what your purpose is, and distinguishing between what is purpose versus passion, and versus the mode that you do it with, and understanding that all those things are incremental parts. Just because you have a profession, your purpose may not necessarily have to do anything with your profession, but it may be the mode that you serve your purpose in, if that makes sense. And then your passion is the energy that goes with it. And then we go into the process of different types of goal setting and understanding how those different types of goal setting apply. I also get into the different phases of success, and kind of guide people through that process to get on track for where they want to go.
Yeah. And what's interesting is you're willing to share even your parenting skills, right? You have a couple books. You alluded to those. I was going to bring those up. One is The Pillars of Powerful Parenting. And then not only reading the book, because knowledge itself isn't power, right? It's applied. So you have a guidebook of how they can do it. There might be some parents out there listening to this saying, wow, how can I transmit this knowledge to my children so that they can be powerful children and achieve their goals? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so that book came out, that was a book of 10 years in the making. It took me 10 years to finish that book. And it started from my time when I was in the classroom. I would have, that's where I kind of started figuring out what my purpose was. I had these high school kids that were coming and talking to me and asking me for advice. And it was anything from their personal relationships to, friends and how to deal with those things, and then stuff that was going on at home. And the more I started talking to them about the stuff that was going on at home, I was relating it back to the dysfunction that I had in my own household growing up, and the things that I was trying to prevent within my own household, and was able to take it and break it down into 10 parts that were essential and seemed to be lacking in a lot of these people's households. And I took all these conversations that I had with kids and I started writing them down. And so each chapter in that book, the first half of each chapter is actual conversations that I had with kids. I kind of channeled it through a single character, but it was multiple conversations with several different kids over the years. And the second half of each chapter is my explanation as to why I gave the answer that I did. The overall overarching theme of that is providing a framework to be able to deal with conflict and to minimize conflict and handle things within your house. And the majority of it, 9 out of the 10, are basic business model principles: effective communication, having a set of core values, goal setting. You can have goals within your family. When you look at raising your kids, raise them with the end product in mind. There's a type of goal setting that's called reverse planning. And, a lot of times I use kind of SMART goal type planning when I do things, but when it came to our kids, we did reverse planning. And so we kept the end product of what we wanted. When our kids walked across that stage and they're 18 years old and they're about to step out and they're considered an adult, whether they're going to go to college or whatever it is that they're going to do, they're still considered an adult. What does that need to look like? And we back planned that, and we're very intentional about the lessons that we wanted them to learn along the way.
That's pretty powerful, because I don't think there's nobody. I know when my dad, I was old enough to remember him saying this, and he had finally become sober, after being an alcoholic. And he said, it's like I woke up and I had 9 kids. I mean, nobody had to get a degree, a certificate to become a parent, right? All you have to do is have a back seat and a couple beers, and you can be a parent, So you've created a series not only for sports but for parents, because really we're in the performance of our lives. Everyone is really, and we're built by design to achieve and succeed, or basically atrophy. So you came up with the 10 week programs. Tell me a little bit about why 10 weeks and what are some of the outcomes that you want to play into that, and maybe if you have some success stories to tell us.
Yeah, so I've got a couple different programs that in place that they're all modeled essentially basically the same, but it's taking the foundation of the books. So my one on parenting, I have some parents and teens that I work with. I'm not a psychologist. I tell them up front, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just somebody that has been in a classroom. I've worked with a lot of kids. I see where the problems are. We've dealt with a lot of things with our own kids. I have 5 children. Almost all of them are grown at this point. We have one left at home. But we've taken all these things and we've put them into practice with our own kids. And my wife and I wanted to make sure that those things worked before I even put the book out. That's why it took 10 years to write it. And so, we had a family that we were working with recently. It was a mom and her son. Stepdad didn't necessarily want to be involved, which that's fine. Mom was the one that originally approached us, and mom was a recovering alcoholic. And she had a 14-year-old son, and he seemed to be angry all the time. And when we sat down, I took some time. I talked to her. I took some time and I talked to him, tried to get an idea of isolate what it was that he was angry about, and then took those things and used those as goal-setting points. As we went through the book and the study guide, that follows along with my parenting book. And then I've got the same thing set up for my Success by Design. I've got coaching for that, where I can sit down and guide people through. And the reason that it's 10 weeks is because we go through a chapter a week. And sometimes on the Success by Design, one is sitting down and figuring out where they're at in their process and their journey, and figuring out where our starting point is. It's kind of more of a fact-finding session first, and then we start going into all the different components and aspects and putting them through exercises to help guide them on that journey.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how people can follow you, because you were just at the TAPS conference. You do a lot of speaking out there. Tell us a little bit about how they can follow you, and if somebody wants to hire you as a speaker, tell us about the process. So if somebody's listening that maybe they want to bring you into a parent group, maybe they want to have you speak for their sports group, or even trainings. I mean, we're going to get you involved with brain tap training. So if you're wondering, we're going to see more of you. We hope to see a lot more of you. So
that'd be great about that. Yeah, so I've got a website. It's drdavismcallister.com. Biggest things, make sure you spell my last name right. It's it's McAlister. So the way I tell people is 1 C, 1 A, 1 L. People seem to like to add extra letters onto my name for me. But you go on there, and I have different pages. There's one page is my media appearances, where you can see other podcasts and other appearances that I've done. I've done stuff with Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I've been on Good Morning Texas. A variety of different things on there, so you can see those things. And then I have a page for resources. And there's links to my books on there, and there's also links that you can get in contact with me if you're interested in one of our coaching programs to be able to work with you. And then create an account. And if anybody listens to this, if you create an account, go in there, put in the subject line brain tap, and I'll send you the first chapter of my parenting book.
That's great. Well, we appreciate that. And I know brain tap needs some help, but we don't have any sessions on that. So I'm going to be talking to you about converting that into some brain tap processes, because of course we believe that subconscious commitment leads to conscious action. So we need to get that going. So tell us a little bit what's ahead for you. When we talk a year from today, what are we going to know? What's different or better that you've been working on?
So I'm constantly working on trying to get more speaking engagements. I've got a couple of different companies that are talking to me about coming in and being a spokesperson for them, being able to share parts of my experience, but also being able to help promote their agendas and the stuff that I believe in. I'm not going to get up and speak to something that I don't believe in. I believe in it, so I'm going to get up and speak to it. And I've got a couple different companies. I'm also doing a lot of work with veteran type companies. I've got a organization that I'm currently working with. We're trying to get in working with hospitals to try to get better care for veterans that are coming in that have commercial insurance. Only 30% of veterans are actually registered with the VA. The rest of them have their own private commercial insurance. And so they're having to go in the hospitals. But the problem is that the majority of people that are hospital staff don't know how to work with veterans. And having worked in a clinic for 2 years where we were working with veterans with traumatic brain injury and doing those types of things, you come up with a laundry list of things that need to be addressed and how to approach these veterans with different topics. And so that I'm working with one organization trying to help with that process. And then here in the state of Texas, they are in the process of putting through legislation now that every hospital and healthcare facility, that when somebody comes in, they have to ask the question, are you a veteran? And so there's some training programs that go along with that. I'm also starting another organization that I'm a CEO of. It's called Steel 6. And we are supporting veteran and first responder owned companies. And so we're going to help promote their products and those types of things. So I've got a lot of different irons in the fire. I constantly want to expand my speaking engagements and be able to get up and impact people and motivate people and inspire and get a new fire lit under people. It's really easy to get stagnant or kind of get in a place where you really don't know what to do next. And sometimes you just need a little bit of guidance to push in the right direction. And a lot of times people will just take off from there. So I'm hoping to do a lot more of that.
That's great. Now, what have I forgot to ask you about that's super important in what you're doing?
I don't know.
Do you want to reinforce, I guess, one of the two? Because I mean, there's a lot more. I mean, we only have a limited time, of course, on these podcasts, and we're going to get you back on at some point. I want to maybe delve even deeper into the parenting thing, because we have a lot of parents, of course, that are using Brain Tap. And I have another podcast called Brain Fitness, the Brain Fitness Podcast. And I think that would be a good place because the parents mostly out there, this is more of our doctors and things of that nature. But tell us a little bit about trainings. I mean, there might be some doctors out there that want to become the sports doctor for their community. What would you recommend for them?
So what I can recommend for them, I will actually, if somebody wants me to work with them, I can come in and do training. Like I said, I do a lot of functional movement work and working with learning how to figure out where somebody's baseline is, how to progress, regress, knowing where those timelines are, and be able to get somebody back on the field, but also being able to take an athlete that is essentially healthy and preparing them, figuring out where those problem areas are and increasing their performance physically. And one thing that I will tell people that they need to look at, sports psychology is becoming a huge industry now. Every professional team, college team, they're all having their own sports psychologist now. And a lot of the athletes will hire their own sports psychologist because they're constantly trying to address and deal with the mental stress that goes along with being a performer and being able to be consistent in their performance. And how do you constantly mentally prepare and the challenges that go with all of that. And so I would say, tell people really look at the sports psychology of things. You really want to get into the mental aspect, and then learning how to teach people to be able to bring that sympathetic nervous system down, get them back down to a parasympathetic where they can focus. Not everything has to be in a fight or flight type scenario in order to be able to perform. And teach people how to perform in that parasympathetic state. So.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, you do have also trainings for doctors. I mean, we have some doctors out there that are basically saying, hey, what are the actual applications? Because a lot of them are protocol driven, right? You say, do this, do that for the first 3 weeks, then that. You have some trainings like that as well. And they would still contact you at the same website. We're going to have all that information. If you're listening to this in your car driving, just go back to wherever you listen to this. We're going to have all of Dr. McAlister's links and social media there. You can follow him, what he's doing. He does a lot of speaking, but if you know somebody out there that needs a great speaker, then he's available as well.
Yep. I've got additional trainings I do. I do squat clinics. Sometimes gyms will bring me in and I'll do one just on squat and learning how to break that down somebody's squat and pick it apart, and then how to rehab a squat. And it's great from a clinical aspect as well. I do different types of sports clinics as well. I do bench press. I can do a deadlift clinic. There's a lot of different things that I can do. That's the thing. When I started working with my coach to kind of get me going in the speaking industry, one of the things they tell you is they said, well, pick an industry, pick pick a topic and become an expert in that topic. The problem is because I have so many different things that I've got hands in. Essentially, they had to narrow. They said, "All right, we're going to narrow you down to 3." so, so we're going to give you 3 topic areas. So my topic areas are sports, health, and I'll do some friends, family, and that type of thing, and then success principles. And the success principles kind of overlap into all of them. So
that's great. Yeah, and please remember that nobody really does this alone. We all have coaches and mentors, and you have a program for that. So I'm going to encourage you to reach out, learn more about Dr. McAlister. He's out there moving and shaking. He's not just sitting in the classroom teaching. He's out there applying his knowledge, speaking in front of the professionals. I mean, for them to ask you to speak at the combine, that's a pretty big honor, because these are the future all-stars, the future Tom Brady's, and Hall of Famers are going to be there. And if they hear the right message, start working in the right direction. So if you're a doctor out there that has a passion for sports, or if you're working as a parent and you need some help, please go over to drdavismcalister.com. And again, we'll spell it all correctly, of course, and have the links in the show notes. And go learn about him, follow him on social media, find out what he's doing, because some of the simplest things that some people take for granted, like just go do squats and bench presses and all these things, people just think you just go in there and grunt it out. And there's a form to it to get the most maximum result. And I have heard in the past, I was a coach, but not at the level you were at. People will get hurt because they're preparing wrong.
yeah.
Right? So sometimes the injuries don't always happen in front of a crowd, so we got to work hard and do that. So anything else you want to leave Brain Tap Nation with, because this has been insightful. We're going to have you back. We're going to, if you're not listening to my Brain Fitness podcast, which is launching here, I'm putting it together. We're going to have mental health professionals on there as well, but I would love to invite you on that podcast as well to talk about the parenting book.
Yeah, that would be great. The only other thing that I've left out is, I'm also still actively coaching. I'm a high school powerlifting coach. My youngest daughter is one of my top powerlifters. She's got 2 national titles and a state title, and she's only a sophomore in high school. So she's still got 2 more years, and I coach the entire girls team. And this last year, I've got it 2 years in a row. I've been coach of the year for Region 6, 4A. Division 2 coach of the year 2 years in a row, because I've had a winning team. I had 27 girls make it to regionals in this year, and then out of that, 10 made it to state. Out of the 10, all 10 finished in the top 10, and 4 finished in the top 5 and medal placed. So those are exciting things that we'll post on as well.
Yeah, that's congratulations. So there you go. He's not just talking about it, he's doing it out there. He's proven it with the hardware. That's the main thing, right? When you get the hardware, that really shows it. I have a good friend of mine now that we've been working together for quite a while, and he was a professional soccer player, but I'd never had seen all his hardware. And then we got in a Zoom call, and I'm looking behind him, it looks like like my high school trophy case. And he said, "Oh, those are all mine from soccer." It's like, wow. But I guess when you get to the Premier Soccer League, you've done pretty well to get there. So people will do that. So if you're somebody out there aspiring to achieve, and if you're a parent that's kind of struggling with what to say, what to do, then you got a solution for them. It's not very expensive. The books are available on Amazon. They're only $20, and the workbook's only $15. So follow him, get those books, start applying it. And then on social media, you give away a lot of free advice, a lot of good comments, a lot of good videos and things like that. So I want to thank you, Dr. McAlister, for taking your time to be here. We're not done with you. We're going to work to get some of your trainings on the integrative health platform that we have, the Brain Tap education system, and get you training our doctors a little bit in some of these ways. So thanks a lot for being on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And it's always an honor for me to be able to come on and, to be invited to be able to come on, that speaks a lot to, that I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose if I'm attracting people's attention. So.
Yeah. So if you have a podcast out there, or you have a place where you'd like to have this message shared, just go over to Dr. Davis McAlister's, and there's actually a contact over there. So you can fill out the contact sheet, tell him what you're about, tell him you heard him on Brain Tap, and then please like and share this podcast. Share it with everyone that not only has to do with sports, because when we started talking, I didn't know about the parenting book. And then when I started researching more about you, I'm like, wow, this guy's multifaceted, because most people that are into sports, they become so consumed with sports, they don't even know they have a family. So I know when I coached, my wife figured out I made 27 cents an hour because I coached at a Catholic school, so, I was the guy that would go on Friday nights to go scout the other team. So, I had a lot of time. When you're the grunt, you got to get in the car and drive and do all the other work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, you put in the time, you're there now. I mean, you went from being homeless. I mean, here's a story, someone who was homeless on the streets. It's very easy to give up. Joined our military, and thank you for your service. I mean, we need more people who are willing to step up and share their story of advancement, and then went on to succeed in the world of coaching yourself. I mean, those are some pretty great accolades with your daughter and the team. A real leader just doesn't do it themselves. A real leader transmits that motivation, that determination, that desire to achieve to their mentees or to their teammates or to whoever they're around. So congratulations. That's a real sign of leadership. So I'm going to encourage everyone out there, follow Dr. Davis McAlister. He's a man on the move. He's doing a lot. If you can help him get his message out, please share his wisdom and knowledge. He's freely given us this day today. We're going to have him on the Brain Fitness podcast talking about parenting. So please follow me over there. You'll hear a lot more about how to apply. Of course, this podcast is more for our doctors and sharing with them tricks and techniques that can help to accelerate their brain as well as their practice. Because I believe that as you increase your awareness as a doctor, your inner consciousness, your outer expression of wealth and success and achievement they're kind of tied together. You can't have in the world around you what you don't have in the world within you. So I want to thank you for sharing those mindset tips, and we'll get this out to the world. And please follow us, because this is Dr. McAlister is just a fine example of what can happen when you start to apply yourself, using everything that you have to achieve and then willing to share it with the world. So congratulations again. This is Dr. Patrick Porter signing off from Brain Tap Nation, and we'll be back again soon. So please stay tuned. We'll bring you the next and greatest thing that we can find for you to help build yourself and build your practice to new levels. We're out to better a billion brains. And if you're listening to me now, it's your brain that we're calling on to really uplift. And then when you uplift, we're going to change the world, because you have an influence on your family, your friends, your coworkers, people in the world around you. So keep sharing, growing, and developing, and know that you are far greater than others have told you about. Unlock your true potential, and let's change the world from the inside out. Thank you.